Well, good afternoon, everybody. Call to order the Finance Committee meeting for August 30th. It's 4 p.m. We have a quorum, so we will commence our business. Before we get started, is there public comment that's not otherwise scheduled to be discussed today? Seeing none. Board, you have minutes that were included in your packet. What's your pleasure? Approval? Hold them over.
Yeah, I'll move approval of all three.
Okay, second?
Second.
Approved.
Aye.
Thank you. So we're going to move into review and discussion of Articles 1 and 2 in the special town meeting warrant. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take Article 2, which is the town's article first, and then do Article 1. I'm hoping as we do Article 2 that information that the town has and will provide will help on the discussion of Article 1. So, before we get started, just a little preamble on what I would like to see us do today and accomplish. This is a very complex issue, and it's got a very big price tag. And it has not only a big price tag for taxpayers of the island, it has a big price tag for residents in the affected areas. And there is a lot of information that is both known, probably a lot of information that is unknown. There's probably information that's correct, incorrect, and halfway there. So I'm hoping as we go through this that those that are speaking on behalf of the town will understand that what we're trying to do is get to a place where we can make an informed recommendation to town meeting about what we ought to do relative to spending $71+ million on this project. So, board members, I know you got a package from Brian yesterday. Hopefully, while lengthy, hopefully you've had a chance to go through it. And there's also answers to the questions that you all had for a while that the town has provided. So, with that, I don't know who on this side's quarterbacking your discussion. It looks like it is Kara.
That would be me.
So, yes?
Yeah, a clarification a little bit. If I read Article 2, we're not asking for approval of all the money. We're asking approval for to be able to do to fund the design of a system.
If that's what it says, then that is correct. But I think if so, yeah.
I said that Article 2, as I read it, is not asking for $71 million. It's asking for whatever it would cost us to do the design.
No, it's the full amount.
It asks for the full amount. It authorizes construction in there.
That's why.
In the article, it does authorize for the construction, installation, and equipping of the extensions of municipal sewer lines and associated infrastructure from the Surfside wastewater treatment facility. So it would be for all,
that's what I wanted to
all
clarify.
inclusive.
Okay, fine, thank you.
So it's.
But there's no amount here.
The amount would be put in the actual motion that the FinCom makes if it's in the affirmative to authorize the borrowing in the amount of that.
Gotcha.
We're all set?
I'm all set.
So it's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Okay.
With me this evening is Rosemary Blakier from Woodard and Curran and Mike Burns from Woodard and Curran as well, engineer here to answer questions that you might have regarding the technical aspects of the project. As we mentioned, we are here looking for...
Could you also move closer to the mic? I guess we're all...
The request, as we mentioned, is for the full $70 million for design and construction, both. The presentation behind you was developed to give you a broad overview of what we're requesting and hopefully trigger some questions. Caitlin Shaw is here from Natural Resources. Roberto Santa Maria will be here from Board of Health.
Great. Okay. Rosemary, I don't know how many people have seen this presentation, but if you could move through it reasonably.
Sure. Yeah, the
quickly
first few slides. It's just a general understanding of where we came from. We can even go through that, Brian.
Okay, just tell me when to stop.
The sewer project is based on the town's comprehensive wastewater management plan. The town completed its management planning for its wastewater system in 2004. Once the estuaries project was done, it had to do an update to add the nitrogen loading factors into it. That update was completed in 2014. So it ranked all the areas on the island that need an off-site solution for their wastewater, whether it's a physical constraint, being small, dense lots, and in addition to the nitrogen loading. It's a 20-year planning document, and the town, as you know, just voted in its first area to be sewered, the Nantucket Harbor Shimo area. The CWMP update has what's called an adaptive management plan to meet the nitrogen reductions. And it's a plan, you've been issued what's called total maximum daily loads, which are federal and state mandates stating how much pollution can go into a water body and still maintain water quality. And right now there are a number of areas on island where the water quality is exceeding those thresholds. So the state Mass DEP, Mass Department of Environmental Protection, has issued what's called a total maximum daily load, which is a mandate from the Federal Environmental Protection Agency under the Clean Water Act. So you've got pollution going into your waters that has to be reduced, mitigated somehow. All right, next, Brian. There are some non-structured nitrogen reducing solutions that we're looking at. One is a septic management plan. The Board of Health has instituted this along Nantucket Harbor with the Shimo area and further up with innovative alternative systems, which is a step up from a regular Title V septic system in that it's almost like a mini treatment facility on your lot. So any properties that are failing within the watershed area up there need to be repaired. Instead of a conventional system, it's going to the step up to the nitrogen reducing system. The jetties is another, their reconstruction of the east and west jetties. You can move on. Again, this is just a picture just showing you how the nitrogen pollution comes in. So you look at the left-hand side, nitrogen from land uses. If you consider that your fertilizers, your stormwaters, your septic systems, it's fed through the groundwater. It comes into your streams. It's like a fertilizer in your water bodies that allows plant algae growth, that cuts off the sun. It kills the fish and the benthic habitat. Nantucket is seeing this with its eelgrass, which is a domino effect with your scallop industry and whatnot. This is posted on the town's website too, so anybody that wants to go back in. Right now, the town is doing an upgrade at the Surfside Wastewater Treatment Facility. Mike Burns, that's with me, is the chief engineer on that project. That's going to support all of the wastewater needs on the island. We were able to do some evaluations, especially in the Nantucket area. The Nantucket area was initially proposed to have a third treatment facility out there on the former FAA land. We were able to do some analyses to see, can we capture this wastewater, bring it to Surfside, which is the highest and best use of a facility that you already own. It needs some upgrades. That process has been designed and probably will go out to bid in the next month or so. It's a state revolving fund loan. We were able to get the state to approve that for the town at 0%. That will go for 20 years. This is the project that was approved back in April. It's the Nantucket Harbor Shimo and the plus areas, which are the infill areas in the town sewer district. That will have an SRF loan application filed this fall and probably go out to bid in another 2 years. Takes a bit to design. This map just shows the various locations where sewer is proposed. You can see the blue and pink area, the blue area, Nantucket Harbor Shimo, which we formerly called Monomoy, and then the gold area plus. Those are the areas that were approved in April. And at the bottom left, you can see Nantucket in the gold, Warren's Landing in the green, and Somerset in the eggplant color. Nantucket, this project is proposed to go forward as a two-phase construction, with Somerset being constructed first because we need that infrastructure in Somerset live to be able to bring Nantucket and Warren's Landing through. Again, that shows Somerset. Somerset will connect into existing infrastructure. You can see it goes into the neighborhood where the green lines are. This is the proposed Nantucket system with Nantucket and Warren's Landing. Why the need to sewer? Oh, Roberto's here. I didn't know if he was going to be here. I'm going to let him come up and talk a little bit about the Board of Health. But one thing I just want to note is Nantucket and Warren's Landing were chosen as an area that needs an off-site wastewater solution in 2004 before we knew anything about the nitrogen pollution. And it was an area where the groundwater is very high, which makes it very difficult to site a leach system. Your soils are very sandy, so they perk very fast, which means your wastewater that comes out of a house goes into your leach field, and it percolates through the system very fast, many times too fast to cleanse it. And when you couple that with high groundwater, that effluent that's not cleansed reaches your groundwater, and that travels to your water resources very fast. So even without nitrogen pollution, the area physically can't support on-site systems. If a lot of systems were to be repaired in that area now, many of them would need a mounded system. In other words, that's bringing the land up, building it up, so that you have the separation. And I'm going to turn it over to Roberto, and he can give you some details.
Good afternoon, Roberto Santamaria, Director of the Health Department. So there's a few things on top of what Rosemary was explaining is that yes, the groundwater is so high and the water percolates extremely quickly. Some of what we have been seeing in the health department on some of these systems is separation to groundwater as low as 1.5 feet, which is the septic system is basically in the groundwater. The only reason it hasn't hydraulically failed is because the groundwater hasn't risen yet. As the groundwater rises, it's going to only get worse. The situation's only going to get worse in the area in Nantucket. To echo the point of the mounded systems, some of you have seen there is a property on Tennessee Avenue, actually, that I was speaking to the landowner yesterday, right off of Tennessee, where he has a very large mound. We have to raise the system in order to meet even basic Title V's regulation, which is 5 feet of separation from the bottom of the leach field. The bottom of the leach field can be as low as 3 or 4 feet below the surface of the sand, of the ground level. So what most people don't realize is that even with IA systems, we're not meeting the groundwater separation. IA systems rely a lot on the biomat layer that's created underneath the leach field. So if you can bear with me for a moment, you have your home on this area. It comes down from the sewer pipe to the tank. The tank then separates the solids and the what we call the sludge layer and the scum layer, and then the clear effluent comes out to the leach facility. So that effluent has to get taken to this field. IA systems have a second component between the field and the original tank that allows for aerobic digestion, which removes most of the nitrogen in the sewer effluent that comes out. Then that gets pumped over to the leach field. Even with the aerobic digestion, you still need to rely on that biomat. we need to pump everything up into a mound just for it to percolate back down into the groundwater. What people don't realize in some of these areas as well, and some people who have already done this, is some 69 people have put IA systems in Nantucket already. It is not a cheap thing to do. And in many cases, it's more expensive than the sewer itself. And then there's a lot of conversations about, why don't we make Nantucket a tight tanks district? Well, the state has already straight up told us tight tanks are not going to happen in this area. And the other reason behind it is because they are a last resort. Tight tanks rely on a alarm system that when the system is 2/3 full, it's basically a large holding tank. When the system is 2/3 full, that alarm rings on the inside of the house. After the owner of the house has, that mini heart attack when that first alarm goes off, they have to call a pumper. Well, that pump machine has to come in, go up to where your system is, to where your tank is, find the manholes, which a lot of times are not at grade, which means they have to dig through your property to get to those manholes, pump out all the sludge and scum and effluent that's in there, take it to the sewage treatment plant for treatment. In order for a tight tank to be viable for year-round use, that thing has to be at least 3,000 gallons or so. Your average septic pumper truck only holds about 4,000 gallons of effluent, which means it's a dedicated trip every single time one of these tight tanks gets pumped. There are 547 septic systems in Nantucket. We are looking at least 10 to 20 pump trucks with maintenance and operators and storage year-round just to pump tight tanks. And if that alarm gets disconnected, well, then now we get untreated effluent breaking out of the top, going into the groundwater, which is even more dangerous than a septic system. And
How many year-round homes are there?
We don't have the number of the year-round home. I'll have to rely on the tax assessor's database on that.
Certainly not 547.
It's certainly not 547, but even if we cut that in half, let's say less than half, 200. We're still talking 200 tanks that are being pumped year-round at a weekly basis, maybe even bi-weekly if we really make them large tanks. It's a significant logistical nightmare to do tight tanks.
Sure, I understand that, but I think that one of the issues that I think is arising is that we seem to be having an all-or-nothing kind of approach to this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than, much as the reports state, that there's a menu of solutions,
Mm-hmm.
and so without engaging on whether the state would allow tight tanks anywhere or not,
Mm-hmm.
but if you think of it as a partial solution, perhaps along Hither Creek on those seasonal homes, there's a tight tank solution for just the houses that are right on the creek, and there's a different solution for houses further away. I mean, and so I challenge you as we sit
Mm-hmm.
here and as we think about this, that perhaps we are getting caught up in this all-or-nothing kind of an approach to the solution. Because it's easy, administratively it's easier, but bear in mind it's also $75 million.
It's also not easier, and I can guarantee you that it's not easier, especially considering that in these seasonal tanks, when you do put in a tight tank, and if the tight tank is not paid attention to and this effluent sits there, the reason they're called tight tank is because they are completely locked up. So as everything is digesting and everything, you're creating sewer gases. Sewer gases include methane. If you leave that year-round in an area that does not freeze, you are effectively creating a landmine, literally. There is more safety issues with tight tanks than people understand. These things, there are documented cases around the country where these things explode.
Yeah, we don't need to get into the discussion about these things blowing up. I mean, I just urge, as we're sitting here, to think about the fact that we don't necessarily have to do an all-or-nothing solution. That this is an opportunity. I mean, if we were talking about $10 million, this is a different discussion. But given that, and given some of the other issues about do we, in fact, if we go to sewers, have to put water in everywhere in Nantucket, because now we no longer have a aquifer that in fact is freshwater but becomes brackish because we don't have leaching anymore. I mean, there's a set of secondary issues that haven't been addressed, that clearly the water company has addressed, that may in fact make doing something in Nantucket not 70, but maybe $125 million. So I think there's, over the years, I think the frustration has been that we just are not applying a lot of brain power to trying to figure out alternative ways to handle this problem. And I appreciate that, they might blow up, but quite frankly, that's the kind of discussion that doesn't advance this any further in our trying to figure out the problem. So maybe they blow up, maybe we shouldn't do them, but just to categorically say no doesn't allow us to have a complete picture of what's happening.
I just want to confirm that is something that we looked at in the CWMP. We had numerous discussions when Richard Ray was in the Board of Health with Mass DEP in the Southeast region and proposed a district with tight tanks. The biggest issue is tight tanks right now are not allowed under the regulations, under the Title V regulations. I think it's CMR
310 CMR
15. It's
so you
not.
have to get a waiver because you're talking about doing them over on the other side of Millie's Bridge.
Well, that was a long process. I just want you to know that we did look at that on the extent of putting them around Hither Creek. The water there, the groundwater, that whole watershed all runs together. Mm-hmm. So even if it was possible to put some tight tanks, you still have other areas that they're still going to feed into it. But it was something that was looked at. It's the CMR, Code of Massachusetts regulations, and that's why DEP said no, just because of the regulations.
Thank you.
And then right before I finish off with my slide here and turn it back over, of the controllable nitrogen that is going into the water, which is 58% septic systems. There is an argument coming out there that why don't we just do IAs in all of it? Well, IAs only remove up to 50% of the nitrogen coming out of this effluent. So yes, we can put IAs on every single septic system and reduce it by 50%. Well, 50% to 48% is still only 28%, which is still more than what the landfill is dropping off.
Are you familiar with the nitric systems?
The nitric systems, not really right now.
No. They're permitted. Rosemary, are you familiar with them? 92% removal, they're permitted in the state of Massachusetts.
They've been tested by the Barnstable County Department of Health. Those are systems that need a significant amount of land. We actually contacted George Heufelder, who's the director over there in Barnstable that's been testing these systems, and asked if Nantucket could be one of the areas that could have maybe a couple of systems put in. They would probably be, when we looked at land areas and whatnot, they probably would be feasible like in Nantucket Harbor, Shakamo, further up on Nantucket Harbor. But yes, we did look at those. We've talked to Barnstable County.
And that's it for me. And then really, kids, what we're coming down to is these 574 septic systems. Of those systems, 85 of them are technically failed, which if the sewer doesn't go out there, well, they're also looking into putting in IA systems. The 26 that are in hydraulic failure, well, this is a relatively old slide. We have already finished our enforcement on them, and they're already in the process of getting, all of them are in the process of getting it fixed and brought back up to Title V, all 26.
But the 85 are still out of compliance?
Well, the 85 are in technical failure. They are waiting to see if they're going to be on sewer or not before they install something like IA, because they do meet basic Title V regulation.
So if we don't agree on funding the sewers at town meeting, would you initiate an enforcement action?
Yes, we would.
So in October 18th, theoretically, you would issue notices to the 85?
Theoretically, all 111 of those failed systems have to put in IAs.
But some have.
That is not including the 69 who have already put in IAs.
So there's another 111 that are
that are going to be looking into putting these significantly more expensive systems. If in 2020 we decide to put in sewers, at that point we're back to this exact moment. We'll be going full circle.
Right.
And that would be what, $5 to $10 million on those homeowners?
Approximately. For not the amount of
Well,
pollution
not
reduction
not the solution that the town and
is
all
hoping
of
to
it-
get.
Right, okay.
What is, Roberto, we were talking about costs of innovative alternative systems. Barnstable County did a report where they actually did a lot of pricing of what different systems cost, the annual operation and maintenance. What are you seeing for a typical property over here?
The most recent quote that we received was actually on Meadowview Drive. It is for an IA system, just the components and installation was $42,000. That is not counting mounting, that is not counting engineering, that is not counting permitting, and that is not counting landscaping. Just the material and the labor is $42,000. So some people, especially if we're going to be mounting by 5 feet, some people are looking into $90,000, $120,000 each system.
And what's the O&M number?
The operation and maintenance agreement is usually around $1,800 a year.
And what's the average sewer bill, Carol? For somebody who's got a system and they're paying for their sewer charges?
It's $250 a quarter for sewer only, about $1,200 to $1,500 for water and sewer.
So it's $1,000 for sewer if you don't have town water, roughly?
That's not counting the pump outs either. Every 2 years you have to have this system pumped out to the tune of $900 or so. And I think that's it for me.
This may be not the right, all right, go ahead, you were going to do something.
Nope, I was just going to start, but if you want.
We're talking about $71 million? 72 million, 71 million?
Whole system.
It's closer, I think with design, it's closer to 80.
It's closer to 80 when you add Somerset. I mean, we're splitting them out. It's 61 million approximately for Nantucket, Warren's Landing, and it's approximately 17 million for the Somerset. So it's closer to 80 million total.
80 million total?
Yeah.
Okay, how accurate are those numbers? You know, and that may seem like a foolish question, but we have a history in town of exceeding the original numbers substantially in some cases.
I mean, those are planning level they're planning level numbers that we took from the original CWMP that was, I think when we were going through the sewer planning work group, those numbers were from 2014. And when we moved forward through capital program and through all the other information and presentation of the board for the Nantucket Harbor Shimo Plus areas, including these when they were originally proposed, we took those numbers and we looked at the engineering books and we programmed everything out at 4.4% inflation, which is probably going to be a little bit higher than what it'll come in at. So I can't sit here today, John, and tell you that those numbers are absolutely perfect, but we are, the numbers originally presented in 2014 were a little bit higher than the average per linear foot to lay the pipe, so I feel confident that they're closer
I can also
actual
tell
than
you
they are
that the amount
away.
that was budgeted for Shimo and Plus is significantly higher than we're going to need. The engineers just did an estimate of the work on a conceptual level design, and this would be closer to 25 million. So this 80 million is very conservative.
Okay. Has there been any attempt to compare it with what other communities have done as far as the cost of laying the pipe and so forth?
We have not, because the cost of sewer here is not comparable to other communities. The numbers that are generated are much higher here than they are off island.
For constructing the
For
system?
horizontal construction, I know that quite a bit of the projects that have been bid recently have come in higher. Those are vertical construction projects, buildings. The horizontal construction does not appear to have that level of uncertainty that is on the vertical construction.
Okay.
We've just bid a couple of sewer projects, not on the island. What we're seeing on the mainland is very competitive pricing, but we can't always coordinate that over here just because Nantucket is different. But we bid 2 projects in the last 9 months, and they both came in well under. It's very competitive for pipe work. We're getting feedback. I'm getting feedback. Kara's getting feedback. The engineers that are doing Surfside right now are getting feedback. State revolving fund folks that work in your region are getting feedback from contractors. They're looking for work, which is a really healthy thing. That's what you want, because you want multiple bids.
Just a quick question. I don't know whether this is for Brian or for you, Rosemary, but the 60-odd million that has been sort of bandied about for the Nantucket run, I'm sort of bothered by, Plus and Somerset are $15, $20 million to trench and dig a line that runs through a neighborhood of homes. And I forget the numbers, but if there's 500 homes out at the end of the line in Nantucket, it seems to me like it's maybe 20, 25 million to do that area, and then a $30 million pipeline that runs across the island to connect to the sewer plant. That just strikes me as kind of a lot of money. Well, it's all a lot of money, but the pipe seems excessive. Have you ever looked at what the breakdown in the 60 is between sort of the distribution out there in Nantucket, and then what's the cost of the pipe and pumping to get between Nantucket and wherever it connects to the system?
Well, the way that it was presented originally, and Rosemary can step in, is that the 2 projects have been presented independent of each other. So the 61 million is to go from the end of Somerset through all the way to Nantucket Warren's Landing. The 17 million is to go from Surfside through Somerset. So they're completely separate projects and have been spec'd out and priced out that way. They're not overlapping.
Well, then maybe let me ask the question more specifically. Can you tell us what's the transmission pipeline from one endpoint out to the Nantucket area? What's that cost? And then what's the cost of the whatever you call it, digging and trenching the 500 homes? Because it just doesn't. Again, I know you guys would know this stuff better than me, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense. If it's $20-odd million to do a neighborhood that's sort of right next to the sewer line, why is it $60 million? I mean, just 7 miles of pipe doesn't strike me as $20 million.
It has to do with the linear feet and the number of pump stations that you'd need. Nantucket is going to take, Nantucket and Warren's Landing, a lot more linear feet to get from every area to be sewered there up to Somerset. It was all based on linear feet. And that's a planning level price. Once you get into preliminary design, you can start looking at that a lot closer.
I just think there's going to be a lot of people who would love that contract.
I think what I heard you say, and I think that answers.
John, speak closer to the
Excuse
mic.
me. What I heard you say, and I think that is that you've done. It's all done on a basis of linear feet, and therefore, if you look at the cost, and you've said the cost per linear foot would be the same here as it is here, basically.
Right. So in that sense, it's all equal. The other thing that's a little different with Nantucket is the force main that's going to come from the actual development out Nantucket Road to Somerset will be a force main. And there'll be 2 different sized force mains because of the seasonal variations of the flow that will come there. So you're going to have 2 pipes. We looked at the original plan was to build a treatment facility out off Red Barn Road. And I think in 2014 dollars, that system, and that would be just for Nantucket and Warren's Landing alone, in 2014 was like $80 million. So there's a cost savings here. It's still a lot of money. I would say, reiterate what Kara said, they're planning level numbers, but they were all based on a linear foot, which includes not just the sewer infrastructure, but it includes your legal, your administrative, your construction services, paving. That's everything rolled into that one number.
Okay.
Once you get in further into design, you break those out better.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Williams?
not to beat a dead horse, but that's what I was kind of, I see that in my mind also, the design, because if you go down by the bridge at the end of Cambridge Street, I think it is, and I tried to see which portion of the sewer was, it's kind of a small picture, was gravity fed, and we're talking about the problem with the water table and stuff like that. It just seems like there's a lot of pumping that's going to take place, and was that, I know we did some engineering, but have we done at least that much in-depth engineering to find out if is it going to be more expensive? I mean, because it's pretty diverse. If you take Fisher's Landing and you're coming all the way from Nantucket, it seems like there's going to be a lot of pumping stations.
No, that's not. That, again, is part of the design.
That's already been done? Or
No.
Okay.
You have to do that. You want to have survey go in. You want to look at the topography. You need to get your elevations. There are some areas in Nantucket that probably could be served by low-pressure sewer, which is a very small diameter pipe and individual grinder pumps. Mike that's here can explain that a little more. If in fact, and we won't know that until we get into design and you get your survey done, but if it's low-pressure system, number one, that controls the size of your system. So it's going to limit huge amounts of flow, and it's less expensive than a gravity system. So, in fact, the cost of this, once you get your design done, could be a lot less. But we don't know that yet. Again, all we've done is planning conceptual. And this is typical for any sewer project.
So with planning conceptual, are you plus or minus 20%, 30%?
I wouldn't even venture to say that because it depends on what the bids are. What
No,
I will say
understand
is
but
that it's...
your professional engineering opinion, when you
Is
do
that-
planning level, is it
is that
plus
the
10,
numbers
plus
we've
20?
given are very conservative, that I would expect them to be less.
Great. We asked a bunch of questions. Kara, do you want to walk us through the questions and have the appropriate people respond?
I think there's a couple more pages that might
Oh.
get into those.
I'm sorry.
All right, why the need to sewer? The first I explained to you, it has to do with site conditions, small lots, high groundwater, severe soils, and then you add the nitrogen loading on top of that. The estuaries plan that was done determined that 58% of that nitrogen loading is coming from the septic systems there. That watershed feeds from Long Pond to Nantucket Ditch to Hither Creek to Nantucket Harbor. The way that the state is monitoring its notes TMDL, the total maximum daily load, is they have incorporated your water quality sampling results into the groundwater discharge permit for Surfside, for the Surfside facility. So every so often, the Natural Resources Department works with the DPW to get sampling results that DEP monitors. They're watching. You've done your CWMP. They've approved it. They've approved financing for you. This will be the third year going in that they've approved the financing. They're watching to see those numbers. These are the numbers in your water bodies where the threshold limits are set. They're watching to see if there's any movement there. The other thing we have to remember, too, is those numbers are set with the development as they were at that point. You've got to consider build-out. As Nantucket grows a little more, you've got further loading. You can go to the next one. These are, one of the questions you asked were graphs showing the nitrogen loading. This shows there's three graphs, the average of 2010, 2012, and 2013. 2011 was done by a company other than UMass Dartmouth, and those results were not done the same way, so they're not included in any of these samplings. This is from the 2015 technical memo on the water quality, which is posted on your website. Again, nitrogen continues to pollute the waters. We're seeing some annual variations in some of the sampling areas. For example, I was talking to Caitlin Shaw from the Natural Resources saying I would expect this year's results to come in pretty high because precipitation has been down. So you have higher concentrated loads with less dilution.
Just, Rosemary, just a quick question on the chart from the page before. The document talks about 4.45, was it million gallons per whatever MG/L stands for, but all the graphs are sort of below the target. Is that just because Nantucket Harbor is kind of fine? It's if these other bodies of water closer in Hither Creek
Yes.
are a problem?
It depends exactly where your sampling is. Your total maximum daily load, the major threshold is set right in the middle of Hither Creek. That's where the annual eelgrass, the historic record showed eelgrass came to. Everything was based on eelgrass. There is a total maximum daily load in Long Pond as well. Long Pond feeds the ditch feeds the creek, and so forth. So you've got to correct it all the way down. But it will vary, but it's not stayed below. It's not met the threshold or stayed below yet, because probably the biggest thing that the town has done was institute the fertilizer regulations. Fertilizer had a very small component, I think 8% contribution here. Nope, you can go by that. We did that. The state revolving fund, I actually sent in an application a couple of weeks ago for you for a Nantucket for this project. It would be the third year that we've applied for state revolving funds. You have an opportunity for 0% SRF because that's based on the environmental bond bill. Senator O'Leary, Robert O'Leary, when he was representing the Cape and Islands, put forth legislation that dropped the SRF from 2% to 0%, and all of Nantucket's projects will qualify for that. What's new this past year, too, is instead of a 20-year payback, you can pay back over 30 years. So it gives you an additional 10 years to pay back, all at 0%. So that just brings your costs down. Brian pulled these numbers together. These are just, do you want to go through this, Brian?
I mean, this is just the same thing that we've presented before using two different ways. The average assessed value, regardless of residential status, of $1.784 million, shows the impact to Somerset and Somerset homeowner for that project, or any homeowner on the island, excuse me, and then the impact to for the Nantucket Warren's Landing portion of the projects. And then we've shown it for the average assessed value of a year-round residential home, again showing it broken out between the two projects, what they would do to tax bills, because they will be timed differently based on the completion and the borrowing schedules of the projects.
And Brian, this assumes 100% on the tax base, no better. I mean,
That's
this is assuming we stay with the policy that was established at town meeting.
That's consistent with the town meeting vote from April of 2016.
This just explains the warrant articles that deal directly with the approving the borrowing and adding to the sewer district. I don't know what the date, I don't know if there's been a date set for a ballot question follow-up.
I think we've discussed December, but I don't know that the date's been set yet.
Okay.
So.
People ask, what if we do nothing? Is there a do nothing choice? Because you have been issued a total maximum daily load, and this is also up on the website, the total maximum daily load says you have to reach this threshold in order to restore water quality. There's no specific time limit in it, but that was issued in 2011. That's the, I think there was a question, is SRF going to go out of business? Why the drive for 0%? It has more to do with the TMDL date of them issuing you a mandate in 2011, and they're waiting patiently. I can tell you that Nantucket is much farther ahead than any Cape community. The Mass Department of Environmental Protection has been very cooperative with every aspect of what we've done with the wastewater system. This is the third year that we have applied for financing. We don't have a finite approval now, but I've been told there's no reason why it made it the last 2 years it wouldn't. The 0% is not a given. It's a very competitive process, especially for the 0%. The SRF, the State Revolving Fund, is 80% federal money with a 20% match. And of that pool of money, a certain percentage has to be dedicated to environmental justice communities like the city of Lawrence, Brockton, communities where there's a really diverse population and a very low median household income. A certain portion of that money has to get dedicated to green projects, energy efficient projects. And then it's a small percentage that they will dedicate the 0% because they still have to operate on their regular schedule, which is you pay in and they loan it out. So it's a very competitive process. It's not a given. We were lucky. This project, Nantucket, rated very high on the list the last 2 years. Mass DEP has been over here. I actually had Erica load the presentation that DEP did on the Nantucket TMDL. So if anybody's interested in seeing that, that's up on the main webpage. That will give you all the language that the state came over with this mandate. If the state has to enforce a TMDL, what you do is you lose your ability to borrow SRF money. They can come over and because it's a continual pollution for the waters, which is against the Clean Water Act, they'll tell you how to do your project, when to do your project, and they're not going to loan you the money. Not that that's by no means a threat. That's what DEP said when they came over here. That's the reality of it. Right now, they're working with Nantucket as well as a lot of other communities to help you move forward to do the projects.
Is it your opinion we're not making progress?
No. But no, you're making progress because you've done your studies, you're updating your plant. When they talk about progress, they talk about seeing those threshold numbers coming down. That's what I mean.
So we're mining the landfill. We have fertilizer regulations in place. We're doing some enforcement on septic systems that are failing. We're doing the harbor, Shimo area. We're raising the jetties. We've taken care of a lot of the sewer overflows. We are seeing in Long Pond the total nitrogen numbers coming down as we've been mining the landfill. We have some indication perhaps that they might be coming down at the Sentinel station. I guess I'm always mystified when you and others make the statement that it seems to imply we're not making any progress, and unless we put sewers in, then the state is likely to do an enforcement action. And it doesn't compute. I mean, the town is doing a lot, and we're spending an awful lot of money, whether we're getting 0% interest or not, on these projects. So I think it would be helpful to this committee to get a sense of whether, in your opinion, we're making progress or not.
Right, and I do think you're making progress. When the state talks about making progress, when we filed the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, in that plan, we filed adaptive management plans on how the town was going to move forward to address the nitrogen pollution in all these different areas, Nantucket Harbor, Hummock Pond, Nantucket Harbor. The plan that was filed for Nantucket was a combination of sewers and the landfill, with a determination that we need to do some additional testing to make sure, to finitely determine that mining that landfill is what's making those numbers. There's 2 sampling stations in Long Pond, and they've had, one station has shown an improvement, another one has varied. We want to finitely determine, is the mining doing that? We ran a host of what is called model scenarios. What if we did this? Computer models. What if we did this in this area? Would this meet that threshold? One of those models was, what if we removed the landfill in its entirety? If the landfill didn't exist, would that meet the thresholds in Long Pond and Hither Creek? And it did not.
Did it meet the thresholds in Long Pond?
No, it did not.
So even though the numbers show that you're almost down to the 3-year average in the 2 sampling stations, with only half the landfill mined, you would still say that further mining of the landfill won't get us down below that number?
No,
this is what really confuses me, is that there's clear evidence in the Long Pond stations that there's improvement in the total nitrogen levels. You're almost to the point where your 3-year average is below 0.8, which is, as I understand it, the threshold for nitrogen in Long Pond. and we mined half the landfill, and yet we sit here and say the models say that it won't take care of the problem. I mean, I guess I would submit that perhaps, much the way they suggest in this, that perhaps we go back and remodel some of this with the current data. And if, in fact, it's been done, then it should be shared. If it hasn't been done, and Mass clearly offers it up at a small fee to the town, perhaps we ought to be taking a look at making sure these models are updated. This model was run, what, back in 2009?
Right.
It was before we started mining the landfill.
Right.
We're also behind, as you know, our schedule on mining the landfill. I mean, I think, you know, this is not to focus only on the landfill, but it's to say that clearly something's happening in the water there because of what we're doing with the landfill. And yet we're sitting here talking about removing some marginal increment of nitrogen for another $71 million without really knowing what the impact of taking care of the landfill is. And you know, there's a disconnect here, and that's what I'm trying to hook up here.
I think to clarify that, the company that does your water quality monitoring has suggested doing some additional tests to be able to finitely determine that the mining of the landfill is what's having the impact. It's one station in Long Pond. There are two stations, stations 5 and 6.
Yeah.
One of them is showing an improvement over the years. The other one has bounced. It's been higher one year. That could be for a number of reasons. I don't want to say to you that, yes, the landfill's doing that, because I don't have that information to say it. What we've recommended to the town is, yes, do this additional testing to see what impact finitely the landfill mining is having. It could be a year that you don't get a lot of rain, so you don't have precipitation feeds your groundwater, which is base flow that comes into your streams. When you don't have that, you don't have dilution, so you've got very heavily concentrated nutrients. You know, maybe it's a combination of things, but you've got a huge amount of septic systems down there. The report showed a 58% load. Even if you accelerated the landfill, the mining, and you're showing improvement in Long Pond. Long Pond still feeds into the ditch, which feeds into Hither Creek. If you still have all this septic systems loading nitrogen, your improvement upstream is not going to help you downstream much if you continue to load. So what the scientists, and this is not the engineering, this is the science that was done, said you need to remove the septic loads.
I'm a skeptic. But I'm not skeptical of the science, so, you know, don't pin my skepticism on the science. I'm looking at the data that comes from here, and the numbers are clearly going down. The only thing that we are doing is mining the landfill, and it strikes me that we at least ought to see, and perhaps recommending to the town, that we speed up mining the landfill so that we get the stuff out of the watershed and see what it does, you know, to these numbers. I mean, in LP6, this is the data that comes from the consultants or the lab. For the past 2 years, you're under 0.8. The 3 years ago, you were above just a tad. Had a bounce in 1 year, but otherwise, you know, the numbers are clearly coming down. And so...
You want to?
Hi. The threshold based in Long Pond is called a secondary threshold.
Right.
That's not the threshold that the Department of
understand.
Environmental Protection is basing our mandate of the Clean Water Act on. So if you look at the additional materials that I provided, it might give you a little bit of a better understanding of where the total nitrogen content has been. And last year it did raise at that Hither Creek station above the threshold again. We would need 3 years of that Hither Creek station to be below our TMDL in order for it to be considered taken off the 303D list.
Absolutely understand, and my only issue with Long Pond is one would presume, since it feeds the ditch and feeds Hither Creek, that an improvement in Long Pond, which might indicate that the mining is having some impact, would contribute to improving at the Sentinel Station in Hither Creek. Okay, so there's been a slight decline, as you know. There's been a little variation, but there's been a decline at the Sentinel Station in Hither Creek. It's not consistently below 0.45, and it did bounce up. But one would presume, and if you're using Long Pond as sort of the telltale of what's happening with the landfill, are you suggesting that there is no relationship between the water quality in Long Pond and the landfill?
No, there is a relationship. However, the models have shown that we need to decrease the wastewater load as well. Decreasing loading due to the landfill will have an impact on the water quality in Hither Creek. But as Rosemary said, without removing that wastewater load, you're still going to have the same effects of eutrophication and a degradation. We're seeing dissolved oxygen levels below 5 milligrams per liter, which is not conducive to some fish and shellfish survival in Hither Creek. So I don't think that I don't believe from a scientific approach that a wait and see attitude in this case is warranted, especially given the loss of eelgrass that we've already seen in Hither Creek. And a lot of these values, these TMDLs, are based on the habitat that it can provide. And it used to have eelgrass there, and it used to have higher dissolved oxygen levels as well.
David, I'm actually, a question to you, actually. I'm not sure I follow the line of your questioning. Are you arguing that if Long Pond, the landfill mining in Long Pond is improving, we don't have to do anything? I mean, it seems to me there's still an issue of the...
Precisely. I think...
You know, that the septic systems in Nantucket clearly are discharging something into the groundwater. I mean... No
question. Not at all in dispute. From my perspective, the question is, if you mine the landfill, and the improvement in the water quality in Long Pond is perhaps indicative that by mining the landfill, the quality is improved. And we are seeing some improvement. As Ms. Shaw points out, it's not been 3 consecutive years in Hither Creek, but one could perhaps draw the conclusion, perhaps it should be remodeled, that improved water quality in Long Pond getting into Hither Creek is having an impact on the water quality in Hither Creek. If that is the case, and we get close to these numbers consistently, the 0.45 total nitrogen in Hither Creek, which is the goal, perhaps there is another set of solutions besides spending $71 million to get 0.02 milligrams per liter of nitrogen out of the water by sewering the rest of the water body. I mean, that's what we're talking about. What's the cost to remove some unit of nitrogen?
Well, I certainly think we can talk about the cost. I'm not sure I'm convinced that sewering or doing something other than what we're doing today is going to, well, we still have to address 569 homes that are putting nitrogen and other chemicals and things into the groundwater that, just looking at the numbers, it looks to me like you have sort of improving flow coming up. What do I know about science? But coming towards Nantucket, and then there's, Hither Creek sort of jumps up. So I assume that's from the homes in the area.
The upstream contributions don't negate the need to deal with the downstream inputs. So sewering is something that's necessary for the septic system. And while I don't think it's out of order to talk about the inputs from the landfill in Long Pond, the overriding consideration is the septic systems that need to be removed out of the watershed. When the CWMP was the MEP was approved and the information from the MEP put into the CWMP, that was the point when the discussions were had about what are the adaptive management issues that would improve the situation in Nantucket Harbor. And while the Nantucket Harbor has fertilizer, jetties, sewer, stormwater, Nantucket has one, and it's the septics.
Right. Shall we move on?
Did you want to go to the questions that you had sent? Is that what you wanted to do, Mr. Chairman?
I'll defer to what the committee would like to do on the questions. Do you have elements on the questions that you'd like?
No, I thought they answered the questions pretty well personally.
Nobody's here from planning. I mean, that would be the one area, the increased land use, density issues.
Andrew did share the rezoning that he had spearheaded a number of years back. The two districts in Nantucket, the LG3 and the Village District, are both the highest, or lowest density rather. They require 3 acres. And there was one specific parcel that was brought to our attention, a 12-acre piece, and they did, Leslie actually, did calculate that the maximum number of units there, if everything were to be torn down and started all over again, would be 14, but those numbers were used in the evaluation that was done in the CWMP.
Unless it's a 40B.
Correct.
So the issue, I think, and since nobody here is from planning to address it, but I think the issue there is currently septic systems basically limit the size of the houses, notwithstanding how it's zoned, because most people aren't building huge homes and putting 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms in them. I think the concern is that the character of that part of the island changes when you sewer, because now you have the ability to build. You always have had the ability to build bigger homes. Now you have an incentive to build bigger homes because you have more bedrooms. And that just seems to be where Nantucket has been heading over the past few years, as you know, driving around. You know, very, very large homes. It's beautiful, beautiful vistas out there and a lot of small homes.
And Andrew did share that the zoning will never be able to limit the number of bedrooms in a property. It's strictly cover on the parcel, and they are at 10%, the very lowest possible.
I understand, but septic tanks do limit the amount of bedrooms.
But they don't protect the harbor.
Correct.
Yeah. A question that kind of picks up what David was talking about. When you figured the size of the system, you figured it. There were so many lots and so forth. Is the system based on the maximum potential?
It was based on build-out, and as we know,
complete build-out.
Complete build-out, and as we know, we don't approach that.
But it is based on complete. The size of the system is based on complete build-out.
The impact, yes, the impacts.
Now, when you say complete build-out, that includes having secondary
where it's zoned that way.
Okay, so okay.
So as a follow-up, is it conceivable that we could size the system based upon the current number of bedrooms that exist in Nantucket and not increase the flows and only cover the current flows with some, if there's a vacant lot of provision, it could have a 4-bedroom based on the septic system, so that we could do a calculation that says, you know, we'll make the math easy. There's 600 homes, 4 bedrooms each. There's 2,400 bedrooms. Could we size the system for 2,400 bedroom flow and not calculate for any additional capacity?
The only place I would want to run that risk would be in the sizing of a municipal pump station. Pumps are based on the anticipated flow, so you hit the right side of the point in the pump curve. I would not want to oversize the pump, but I would not want to make the pipes too small, because then it's on the town to go back and increase those sizes. But there is an opportunity in the size of the pumps to
So what would trigger having to go back and increase the size of the pipes? What would trigger that?
exceeding the capacity.
But if you size it so that you anticipate what that maximum capacity is under the current scenario, there'd be no more.
But as soon as we exceeded the current scenario, we would exceed the size of the pipe that we newly installed.
So people couldn't hook up then?
Unless it was increased.
Which would require going back to the town to get more money to do the increase.
To completely rebuild.
Yeah.
Most likely it's the force main that goes from the municipal pump station to the Somerset area.
But so as long as you're getting into the weeds, I'll get a step further. Then when it comes to sizing of piping, and I've done a few of those myself years ago. Usually, you allow for a fair amount of safety factor involved, because the difference between a 10-inch pipe and a 12-inch pipe is not a lot of money, and the real money is in the laying of the pipe and not in the material. So I would assume that this is based on having a fairly large safety factor on pipe size. So if anybody has a trouble with pipe size, somebody should fire them. You know what I mean? Because that's the easy part. And as you say, the pumping is the key, and you can always add pump capacity to the system. That's an add-on as opposed to...
As long as the pipe sizes were adequate.
As long as the pipe size.
Yeah,
right.
but the issue is if you're trying...
So the question I had gets back to that, and that is, I assume that you've been pretty generous in looking at pipe size.
At this point, it's purely conceptual, so yes, we're very conservative.
No. Okay.
But it goes back to the issue of if you size for today plus 30%, you're going to get the 30% development out there.
Yeah,
Right, but
they don't size
once
the
you
piping
sewer,
right.
you can't tell somebody they can only have the number of bedrooms they had before. I mean, you can't use sewer systems, municipal sewer systems to get growth. I understand what you're saying. It'd be nice, maybe, if we could maintain that character of the island, character of that area of the island.
But
It's
are we
not
under
possible.
an obligation to provide anticipated capacity?
We would be obligated to expand the system if somebody's legally within their rights in the sewer district. You can't say, we only have room for 3 bedrooms, so that's it.
I don't think that's true.
That's not going to happen.
I had a friend buy a piece of property in Kingston just to find out that the sewer needs to be expanded, and they won't vote for it, so he can't
Yeah.
do what he wants to do.
I mean, I think it's more a legal question, but I mean, if you're trying to figure out how to...
I think it's come up before. Once you're in the sewer district, that's it. You're in the sewer district, and you have all the rights. You have the obligations to hook up, but you have all the rights that come with being in the sewer district, and that means you can't say the pipe's full.
Even if the town voted not to expend the additional funds, that person has the right to go in and do the whole thing, which ostensibly would open up the flows for whoever.
I don't know
Yeah,
if
go
they did.
ahead. That's
Perfect.
Run a new transmission.
But it would go back to changing the character.
I just have one final question, and it's going to be phrased inartfully, but there seems to be a discussion coming out of the water company that because you would be abandoning septic systems, we're going to have a deleterious effect on the lens because there's not going to be the flow through that the septic systems are providing, which would because the lens is so shallow, either lead to high sodium levels or brackishness or both, requiring, as I am led to believe, requiring water to be installed in all of Nantucket, which strikes me as being a unanticipated expense to the homeowner. And so a two-part question, am I correct or sort of correct in my understanding? And secondly, has it been looked at if that in fact is an issue?
It goes to the depth of the private wells. Municipal water wells are between 30 to 60 feet deep because there's a significant groundwater lens that generates a lot of water. It would depend on the depth of the wells in Nantucket. If they were pulling from that particular lens, then eliminating some flows from the septic would cause some issues with quantity. But I have to say that if that's the water that you're taking, then I would be concerned because there's not enough depth for the soil to renovate the septic flow. So I wouldn't want to be taking it from there. So if your well is in the 40 to 60 range, you want town water. And I know Bob has been looking at providing that. Any well that's deeper than that is not taking from that lens, so it doesn't affect it.
Any well deeper, that's probably in salt water underneath it.
No. possibly.
Rosemary, have you had a hydrologist look at this issue?
No, not that specific issue. But what I wanted to add is, when talking about the flows, how the flows were estimated, every property has what's called a state land use code. It's your use that you're taxed on. And we used the state land use codes, residential being most of the land uses out there. We looked at zoning, we looked at land cover in order to estimate flows. We used all that information. So if there's a parcel that somebody is afraid of maybe coming into a 40B and it's right now zoned residential, the flow that we assigned to it was a residential flow. And it's based off census numbers. There's a whole big spreadsheet that was done on that. That would have to go back to the town, number one, to be rezoned and to look at, are there flows available? It is a flow-based system. Your ability to capture and treat and discharge wastewater is a finite number. You are only allowed at full build-out 4.0, 4 million gallons. So I just wanted to add that looking at estimating flows was a very complex procedure.
But it still wouldn't negate somebody from doing a 40B.
No, but there would have to be approvals that come through the town for a change in use on that parcel just for flows.
Which I think they're entitled to. So how do we get at this issue, Cara, about the water? And so, I mean, my understanding from the folks at the water company is that they would anticipate all of Nantucket needing water if we sewer. Okay, so that's and God bless them, the water company charges a hell of a lot of money to hook up. So this is a secondary cost that I mean, quite frankly, until a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't even aware that this is a potential. So I'm not 100% sure of my facts, obviously, but I think it's one of those things that seems to me we should have an answer to, because it may be that for the taxpayer, this is not just a, bring the service in and all of the attendant things related to sewer. It would also be paying to have your water brought in.
Well, water is already down Nantucket Road, and
Yeah, but it's not out in all the places.
no, and there are certain areas where
And there are a lot
the
of
water
private-
company is
there are
in
a lot
this.
of private roads. And
There's a lot of issues with the active erosion zone across Millie's Bridge. I'm assuming that Bob would run into the same issues that we have with CZM not wanting to put that out there. But it is something that we will investigate. We just received the email from Bob today about that, so we will follow through on that.
Thank you.
Bob's comments to me were that the water company is not going to say, yes, this is happening. He's saying there could be a potential. They need to look at that closer. That would be something that, depending upon the area, and my guess is it's the further south properties, that you'd have to look at maybe changing your plan there if the lens is as thin as they say and it's going to be impacted. But he couldn't give me a definitive that, yes, it's going to be impacted. There's a potential, and it's something to look into.
And also one last thing about the water, as far as the wells becoming brackish and stuff, that is something we're looking at anyway. Sea levels rising. The funny part about the science is that it's true whether you believe it in or not. So the sea level is rising, and we are seeing the wells starting to fail out there. I just backed out of a purchase of a home out there because the well is pulling up 25 milligrams per deciliter of salt. And it's significantly far back from the water. So it's happening anyway. Water is going to have to be brought down sooner or later.
And that's fine. I just, it needs disclosure. Okay? I mean, that it would be unfair to go to town meeting and have expectations that sewer is going to come in and then find out, oh, by the way, you're going to have to pay to have Bob put his pipe down your road.
That's
and
fair enough.
hook up. So,
Fair enough.
anyway.
I just wanted to ask if there was any more questions that anyone had.
Well, I have one general comment, which is subject to how our committee might like to approach this. This is a big expenditure. Usually when one spends a lot of money on something, and if one is facing, I'll use a medical analogy here, a major operation, one gets a second opinion. How would you feel about going to a company that focuses on alternative wastewater approaches for a second opinion on this project?
We actually, through the CWMP process, have talked to a number of different companies. Rosemary mentioned George Heufelder over in Barnstable, and he had a number of different IA systems that would be
I'm not
something we
talking
could go
about
to.
systems. I'm talking about another consultancy whose focus of their business is really on alternative wastewater treatment, who's had experience in other terminal moraine kinds of environments, and basically the kinds of situations that we have. Given that we're being asked to make a big expenditure, I would think for pretty short money we would, I know I personally would feel a lot more comfortable having a second opinion on this.
Well, through the CWMP process, the proposal for the capital improvement program in this CWMP for the sewer extensions that we just voted, the ones that we're taking up at the special town meeting, have all been reviewed and approved through the MEPA process, as well as DEP implementation of the MEP process. So I'm not sure that there's going to be a different answer, because the regulators, this is what they've accepted.
I won't comment on the rigor of the MEPA process that was done both by Earth Tech in particular and probably a follow-on by Woodard and Current. I really think, given what we're spending, that this is something that should be given due consideration. Anyway, but that's going to be something that, if we decide we want to do it, that the committee would need to decide. So, anyway, I just wanted to get it out there. So, thank you. All right. Any other?
No, that's it.
So we're now down to Article 1. Mr. Greeter is here. Please join us. Introduce yourself. I have no idea.
Should be on.
Thank you. My name is Bill Greeter, 10 F Street, Nantucket. First off, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me to come up and address this article. Whether it's mandated or not, it's nice that you asked me to, and it's nice that I thank you. So, first and foremost, our article does not, I repeat, does not, we are not trying to stop sewer coming to Nantucket. What we are asking is merely to delay the process until many, many questions are yet to be clarified or answered. And at first I was kind of lamenting the fact that you took the articles out of order, but hearing all the discussion, I'm actually glad, because what you've really done, and actually the town has done, is made our case for us. There's tons of information that needs to be reviewed before we spend a significant amount of money. And we think that it's time that the town start doing projects with a better understanding of what the financial implications are. And Bruce Mandel, who's done an awful lot of work in this sort of area when he was getting paid to spend hours researching stuff instead of now, will address those sections when we get to them. So once again, just to read it, we're not trying to stop this. We want the vote to delay. And delaying this vote, has already been stated, is not going to impact the town applying for 0% financing to reapply. When the town did it the first time, the town meeting vote had yet to happen, and the town went ahead and was successful in getting the ability to receive that money, and we don't see, and the fact that the town's already started to do that is a great thing. We also would suggest that the town should apply to do the increase the mining process at the landfill and apply for it also, because it's our contention that that is a clean water process, and one would think this certainly applies for it. But first and foremost, the town has yet to provide, to our knowledge, a revised full build-out analysis. The development potential in the 2010 estuaries MIPA, which we cited when we sent it in, needs to be updated. It's our contention that it needs to be updated under both current zoning, Board of Health regs, and then under the potential of what the difference would be with sewer. It's our feeling that the town needs to talk about under sewering how more lots are going to be available for increased density. Once sewer septic systems and septic beds are decommissioned, that, as long as it's within the setbacks, that becomes additional building area that folks can reconfigure their house where they currently could now, and we feel that that is going to be a significant change in the look and feel of Nantucket. Understanding that folks have a right to do with their property what they're allowed to do within the confines of the law. So we're not trying to take people's rights away. What we're trying to do is to bring awareness to what it actually means to bring sewer to Nantucket and how it affects not just Nantucket but the town in general. So once again, it's not a question of we're trying to prohibit this density change. We're trying to make folks aware of the likelihood of that happening. Some non-conforming but legal lots will in fact become buildable. The town's frequently asked questions that it just came out with that really stems from a workshop that was done here several months ago, but the FAQ just came out, and thumbing through that, there's some inconsistencies and some clarifications that need to be corrected in there. And first and foremost is the statement that there is no large lots. Rosemary talked about the 13-acre parcel that's currently there. With sewer, that absolutely is ripe for a 40B, and it's the right of people that have that amount of land to do a 40B. That's within their right, and as we know, 40Bs are outside all local regs. And so sewerage will absolutely be a viable option for that parcel. What's even more of an issue for the town that hasn't been talked about is smaller 40Bs. With sewer, the town, especially Nantucket, is going to be, it'd be very possible to have several 40Bs of smaller units. For example, and I included in the information to FinCom, there was just one approved on the mainland, 1.17 acres of land was 8 single-family units within that 1.17. Clearly, you can, as you look around Nantucket, there's several lots that should someone decide to either cash out or purchase some property, it doesn't take a vivid imagination to realize that that is an extreme possibility. That we believe that the town also needs to talk about the increased density, how it's going to affect the island. Not if it happens, but when it happens, because it's our contention that that there will be increased density, which has financial impact to the community. Additional seats and staffing for the school, increased traffic, road repairs or whatever. Those are all things that it's reasonable to assume will increase as density increases. We think that there's things in the interim while the town provides the answers to both the Finance Committee and the town in general. There's things that the town could be doing, such as increasing the mining at the landfill to, as Mr. Worth pointed out, to go forward with a process that the island is already committed to do. The town is behind in it, and why not actually do something on time that we've told the state that we would do. We're asking also, for the purposes of financial planning for the town, what is the state of the landfill going forward? There's studies underway on what to do. The consultant's report that we just read, it isn't a pretty picture. It's going to be extremely expensive for the community if the landfill is closed, and it would almost lend from his discussion that that's not going to be a viable option. So what is the process? What is the time frame? And quite frankly, what is the amount of money that was going to be added on to our taxes going forward with this? We have a big issue with the cost analysis that's done to point on this current project, and I would ask Mr. Mandel, who's done this for a living, to make those points, and I thank you very much for taking the time and listening to us. But we certainly are asking for your support and our delay of the vote till at least the annual meeting. And quite frankly, if the answers aren't there at this annual, then the town needs to hold off until we do have these answers, because they're far-reaching. Thank you very much, Mr. Mandel.
Before you step away, Bill.
Unless somebody has a question for me before I step down.
I just want to clarify one thing. If sewering is the way to go, just if it is, and we find out that it is going to have some other implications, economic implications and so forth, does that mean we deny it simply because then what? So you want to make people aware that there's more to it than meets the eye.
Number one,
what's the end result you're looking for?
The end result is, and I follow the chairman's suggestion, is the end result may in fact be a combination of items. Not all of Nantucket is going to get sewer. Some of the statements about Long Pond, not all of the septic systems in the Long Pond area are going down into Long Pond. They are going into the aquifer at some point.
But excuse me, but then therefore what you're saying is there are some alternatives we ought to be looking at.
Absolutely.
Which, by the way, has nothing to do with the other financial implications you just walked through. I mean, they really don't. When you're really saying that we need to have a solution here. We're trying to figure out what type of solution. That's a technical issue, and what we're saying is we probably have to do something, no matter what the cost is, what the other ancillary cost might be. So I'm not sure what we have to gain if on that issue. There may be other issues, and I think there are, but on that particular issue, I'm just not sure I understand.
So you don't understand why we think that the town needs to know the landfill question?
Oh, sure, I do. But the point is, what is your point on that?
Our point is
your point is
that
simply
before the
that people
project
should,
goes forward, the town needs to know that the financial implications of the sewer, and also
is that going to change anything in the long run?
Hopefully, it'll stop the process where a project has to come back to the town and ask for more money.
Okay.
Right, and Mr. Mandel will talk about what we believe are the missing pieces of the current project.
Any questions? Peter.
Bill, Peter McGackron, question. Have you formulated a list of all those questions you have or think that are unanswered and deliver them to the town or the consultants?
we are working on doing just that. Our first push was to get signatures to get the article on, to, quite frankly, buy us time to get those. Given the fact that we had a public discussion several months ago in this very room, where now the FAQ has come out, it's taken the town with its vast resources that amount of time to come up with the FAQ. So for citizens to be able to come up, pose the questions, and present them in time for the town, then to do it for the town, the spring, the special town meeting, the time is not on our side to do that.
But this didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, this
What's
was
that?
this issue of sewering Nantucket. I mean,
No,
you all were well aware of this well over a year ago.
Oh, actually, we've been well aware of it. We've been, quite frankly, hounding the town since 2003, when the town did not start enforcing the inspections of septic systems in Nantucket. And we were beating the doors down, trying to get the town to do that, because we absolutely are in full support of trying to improve the water quality in Nantucket. So we were upset at the fact that for over 13 years, the town hasn't enforced the regs to have the systems inspected and fix faulty systems. So I didn't even want to get into that today, but we've been behind trying to improve the water quality since it's been brought to the public's attention.
Okay, so now that the single most effective way to get out the water quality is on the table and has been for a few years, you haven't, and the neighborhood associations haven't had time to formulate the questions that you need answers before we can move forward with this project?
We've asked several questions already and haven't received answers. For example, what is the treatment, pardon the unintended reference, for those of us that have put the systems in? There isn't a plan on how we aren't going to be double paying, because we've done what we should have done, and the town hasn't figured out how we're going to deal with that. We've asked questions on design capabilities. There's several questions that we have asked. So, it isn't that we're not asking questions. It isn't that we're not willing to work with it. The town is going forward with this project for sewer, and we think that there are other questions that need to be answered so that we know what it's going to cost us. A major hurdle was spreading it out over the full tax base versus individual homeowners.
David, if I may, Bill, how long do you think it would take for you and your group to put together that list of questions?
I quite frankly, I don't know. It is something that we're formulating now, and it certainly, I don't think it's within our capabilities to have the questions along with the questions we have about the cost of the project anyhow. It shouldn't be, I don't think, it shouldn't be just about our concerns. I think it needs to be, it's an island issue. The harbor, the water quality, it's an island issue. It affects our quality of life. It affects our industry, which is tourism. That's our 20th century whaling industry, is tourism. It affects all of that. And so, we aren't trying to stop that. We're trying to get a better understanding of what is expected from us as homeowners, what is expected from the town, quite honestly, on services and what it costs us. So, I think this whole process, it shouldn't be on our shoulders how quickly we can get this done. There's plenty of questions out there already that haven't been answered. So this is just an additional group of questions.
So if we were to make a recommendation, well, we're going to have to make a recommendation on your article to begin with. And we were to make a comment, how do we phrase it so that the town knows what the expectation of them would be over the intervening 4 months or 5 months? At the end of this process, so let's say that town votes and says, we agree with you, Bill, on your article, we want to delay it. Now what happens? What's the obligation that the town has? How would you propose that it gets structured so that we're not in the same place, come March or April?
Exactly. I mean, one would hope that in the delay between now and the annual, the questions that we posed.
So the questions you posed here are the ones that you want answered.
But these
as well as some. So, I mean, there's a co-petitioners here, so I don't want to just speak for Mr. Mandel also. So, if we could ask him.
Go ahead, Bruce, if you...
And then you'll have...
Ready to listen to Bruce?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bruce.
This article was carefully
Gotta be.
discussed and written, and I want you to take a look at the-
Please introduce yourself.
Bruce Mandel, Ted Medley, sorry. This article was carefully considered and written, and I want you to consider the wording of the article. It seeks a couple of things. It seeks a deferment of the two issues that are being proposed by the town. Hopefully, we can get this resolved by April. But it also seeks to establish a work group to try to answer the open issues and unanswered questions. And the work group is meant to be all-inclusive of not only groups from Nantucket and island-wise, but also the town. Before we had the July forum on this issue, there were probably 25 or 30 questions and open issues that we were anticipating the town would address at that forum. The forum only led to more questions. And at that forum in July, we were told that all of these open issues and unanswered questions would be gathered into frequently asked questions and published within a week. It took 5 weeks. It came out last week. I don't know if you folks have seen it, but it's a comprehensive list. It's 9 pages. And it's only come to us in the last couple of days, and by reading it, we see there are more open questions. There's no one that I have talked to in Nantucket that is denying we have to protect the eelgrass in the harbor, that we have to protect the groundwater and the watershed. No one is saying the sewer is not needed. What we're saying is there are so many open questions. Financial open questions, technical, density issues, and what we're getting from the town, even on their own question and answers, where they'll ask a question and then answer a different question. We just want to get to the bottom of this. We're going to spend $78 million, or we're going to authorize $78 million. You've seen with the fire station, you've seen with the school. We're coming back for more and more money because we haven't thought things through carefully enough initially. We've been told here a couple of times, these are schematic plans. They're not developed yet. Every project that I did through my career, nursing homes, hospitals, sewage systems, the less information you have in design leads to more and more cost later as plans are developed. There's always design contingencies. This early in a project, a design contingency might be 20-25%. And as plans and the engineers develop their plans more and more, those contingencies are reduced to 20, 18, 15%. You go out to bid, and then there's a construction contingency, 10% on good plans, 15% on okay plans. And then the owner himself has a project contingency. All we have now are 2 numbers. You've got a number for design and you've got a number for construction with not enough information. What you need is time. to build information and reliability, and that's what we're seeking. The more we heard today, as we went through Articles 2 and 3, more and more questions came up. We hear more and more vague comments where the state sort of told us that you can't have tight systems. Well, did they tell us you can't or you can? We hear statements that, well, if we have improved systems, the alarm might fail. Well, in the type of system we're going to build, we're going to have lift stations because it's a forced main. Stuff doesn't flow uphill, it flows downhill. You got lift stations. Those lift stations need power. The power fails on Nantucket. They'll have alarms too. So these kind of scary things that happen have to be discussed and gone through. We hear systems, if you read the frequently asked questions, this system is going to be operational in the year 2024. That's 8 years from now. That's almost 100 months. What we're asking for is a 4 or 5 month overlapping period where we can try to come up with at least some more answers. Maybe not all of them, but enough answers, and the objective is when this town votes on this, that the people who are voting are making as fully an informed decision as they can make. And right now, we don't have enough information for folks to make a fully informed decision. This is a big project. I don't know how many of you have built a $78 or $80 million project. That's a big number for a little place like Nantucket. We were told that if we don't do something, the state's going to come in. Well, that's not so. We are doing something. We're doing lots of things. We've prudently applied to the state revolving fund now. Well, we've done that for the past several years, and we've intentionally made the decision to pull the Nantucket project out. Well, now we're putting it back. And as long as we're making progress, there's a July threshold and there's an October threshold. And in 2017, even if we vote in April to move forward with the project, we can still meet the July threshold and certainly the October 2017 threshold. So I think it's important to understand that we are only asking for a little time to work together as a community to get the answers that we need to make a better and informed decision, so we don't have to come back 2 years from now and ask for another $8, $15, $20 million for this project to be completed. Because once you put your foot in the water with the project, you can't take it back out. And that's the whole purpose of this article, is to get information and to get us all on the same page. And I'm not going to go through all the little checkpoints I made while these folks were talking today about the new questions, because I came here with 25 or 30 open issues, and I've probably got close to 40 now. But the point is, we have time to make a decision, and I would hope you would support the concept of giving us time to get those answers so that we can make an informed decision, hopefully in April. Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Thanks, Bruce.
Hopefully in April. What always makes me nervous, and I've done, by the way, I've done many that over the years that exceed that amount of money at a given project.
Sure.
And we all know, those of us who have done big projects like this, we all know that you never get to the point where there are no unanswered questions.
Right.
So and David was struggling with that himself when he was asking the question of, at some point in time, we're going to have to fish or cut bait. And I think what is bothering us a little bit is, how do we know, if we're saying, well, let's delay it till April, and then this committee gets together, and then they say, well, gee, we just can't answer all the questions that we're having, so let's delay it another 6 months or 8 months or a year or so. And you kind of wonder, what is it going to take to satisfy certain people that we've answered enough questions? Because we're never going to be able to answer all the questions.
I would
Especially
agree
if
with
they're
that.
not written or submitted to anybody. I mean, how can we answer questions we don't have? How can the town answer questions that we don't have? This issue, and I'll say it again, didn't surface 2 months ago. So I appreciate that you had to go around and collect signatures and you didn't have time to write questions down. You had months in the interim, and you had years before then.
We did ask the questions. We haven't gotten
Mr.
the right
Reader
answers.
told me that you haven't. You don't have the questions. You haven't submitted them because you don't have them, and you don't know when you'll be able to
I don't know
formulate
why
them.
you're saying that. We have
That's what
submitted
Mr.
the
Greeter
questions.
just told us.
We have. We sat at a forum in July and stood here and asked questions for hours. And to your point, when do you reach that point when you've done enough due diligence to move forward with a project? It's when you've reached a level of having enough financial feasibility in terms of knowing what the project is, technical feasibility, to know you have a reasonable assumption that you're going to be successful. You're right. You never have all of the answers.
Who determines that?
Finance committee and the voters.
Okay.
Any other questions of Bruce? Any audience people want to say something?
What's the downside of waiting?
Please introduce your.
Hi, my name is Victoria Gervin. I'm at 11 Midland Ave. My question is, what's the downside in waiting? I mean, this project isn't going to be done for many, many years. We've waited a long time to do the sewer. We've let people live in homes with septic systems that weren't passed. So suddenly we have to do something in the next few weeks. I probably am in favor of sewers, but there are a lot of unanswered questions. And when someone says, well, there's a 12-acre plot that you can only put 14 houses on, don't worry, and then someone says, well, what about 40B? Do people know that who live on the island or live in Nantucket know that that area can be developed? We could have how many apartments or houses? What about my septic system, which we spent money on to upgrade and make sure it was correct? Fine, I don't have any complaints about that, but no one has told me what will happen when sewers go in. I've been told that we have to just cap it, easy, or no, we have to dig it up. It happens to be under our vegetable garden. So that's just two questions that I have. I'm worried about development, I'm worried about density. The town will make a lot more money as the density increases in Nantucket. And that's a conflict of interest. The water department will make more money if there are more homes in Nantucket. That's a conflict of interest. But is the town or whomever concerned about the residents, or are they more concerned about bringing in more money? So I just want some time taken for us to look at it and look at the questions that people have. A lot of people who aren't here, and there are many who are not here, don't have any concept that they may have to get water if sewers come in. I mean, people just need to know what they're voting on, and I think it's unfair for people not to be informed about what's going to happen when or if sewer comes in. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Charlie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Charles Stott. I'm president of the Nantucket Residents Association, which has not yet taken a position on any of the warrant articles under discussion today. But I would like to say at the outset that our members are very strongly in support of preserving our water resources. And I know this for a fact because before the 2016 annual town meeting, we conducted a survey of our members, and 87 of them responded to that survey. And the overwhelming majority, 66%, we're prepared to write large checks in order to extend the sewer system to Nantucket in order to preserve the quality of our water. But as you've heard today, there are a number of questions and concerns, and I think among our members, one of the major concerns is overdevelopment. We know that there is a 2.5 acre parcel out in Surfside where Atlantic Development wanted to put up 60 units under a 40B. That 12 or 13 acre parcel at the corner of North Cambridge and Nantucket Road, you could put a couple of hundred living units in there. And I think our members are really struggling with somehow reconciling their very strong interest in preserving our water resources with their strong interest in preserving the character of Nantucket. So we're going to try to figure out where their heads are at over the next few weeks and decide what position, if any, we take on any of these warrant articles that are going to be considered in October. We've got a newsletter that I hope will be out sometime next week, which will provide an objective summary of the July 13th public forum that was held for Nantucket folks. And we're going to have dueling opinion pieces. Mr. Mandel has written an op-ed making the case for the delay until the annual town meeting next year, and the town has just submitted an op-ed providing its position on why there should be an affirmative vote on questions 2 and 3. After we get that newsletter out, we intend to survey our members once again and then make a decision on what position, if any, we may take. But to say that it certainly isn't the case that Nantucket folks are resistant to it. They're overwhelmingly in support of doing whatever is necessary to be done, including sewering, if that's the only feasible alternative in order to preserve the quality of our waterways. Thanks for your consideration.
As I was sitting here thinking, you asked a question about why didn't we ask questions sooner. It was only a week and a half ago that I went to the water company to inquire about why we hadn't run water down our little private street. And that's when the first discussion came up about we're going to hold off on running water down Midland and South Cambridge and Columbus until the sewer vote is taken care of. And the question became why. And that's when it came out that the hydrology out there, due to the thin freshwater layer on top of the thick saltwater layer bubble, would be affected by whether we get sewer or not, and how that would force that thin freshwater layer up and drive the saltwater layer up so that the existing well points that are in freshwater now would be in brackish water. That's when that issue came to light. I couldn't have asked that question 2 years ago, a year ago, 8 months ago. Those are the kinds of questions that just come up as you dig more and more and more into the issue of what does sewers mean for Nantucket. And that's why these issues come up, and we just need time to address them.
Great, thank you. On that issue, Kara, there is, as for everybody knows, there's a public hearing, I think, on the 13th on these articles, so we'll be doing this again in a public forum, but I would hope that you would have something that you could share with us from Bob.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know how many people remember Phase 2B downtown. We did the sewer and water installation at the same time, and if it's necessary, it's certainly something that we can accommodate.
Yeah, I think I'm sure you would stage it correctly. I think that it's the financial ramifications that is probably of most interest to the committee and certainly to the taxpayers.
I did want to answer a couple of questions if people are interested.
I meant to ask.
The question came up about the systems that have already been replaced, and the Board of Health has a waiver provision and has already granted quite a few waivers, and they can extend the amount of time necessary for connection if the system is operating correctly. So anybody that has upgraded their system anywhere can apply to the Board of Health for a definitive period of time, a waiver. Then there was another question about costs, and the costs for a connection fee is $500, and the privilege fee gets put on the taxes, and that's $63, $22, and 15 cents. The construction costs are paid directly to the contractor, and I believe that what you'll see is that the contractors will be doing wholesale business, making connections. The design of whether there's going to be low-pressure sewers, grinder pumps, or gravity is going to be totally based on the survey, rather. And the reason we're starting now for a construction period a number of years out is that it takes us that long to get the easements in the private roads and get the survey done, get the design done, go out to bid, and actually begin the construction. The design will most likely take close to 2 years to get everything surveyed and designed. And I noted in the document that Mr. Mandel had put together about all of the items that weren't included, and I did want to say that they actually are included in the design construction cost. And as I mentioned, it is an exceptionally conservative number. He was talking about 25% contingencies. I believe the one at the planning level is closer to 30 or more. So there is conservative contingencies applied. And everything that was on that second page that they had is included.
Great, thank you. So, Roberto, I had a question for you. When I sat on I was the FinCom's rep to the sewer finance, planning, whatever group it was that went on forever and a day. One of the questions that came up was, and I think we had a conversation, which was the Board of Health codifying the program rather than sort of making it seem more discretionary on the part of the Board of Health. I would think that it would be helpful if a individual that had a system put in knew exactly what the program looked like and how it was going to be effective, rather than sort of guessing and coming before the health department.
So in general, the way it's working right now is to answer the questions that we have about the IA systems that are already put in and how they're going to be treated, is the Board of Health has already expressed an interest at granting these waivers for people who are affected, where they paid attention to the rules and regulations that were passed in 2003, 2005, and so forth. They don't deserve to be punished. They should be lauded for the work that they did. And these 69 systems in Nantucket, and there are a couple others in Schimmel Pond area that are going to be getting sewer soon, because the number is so low in comparison to the greater number of the people getting sewer, the Board of Health has expressed interest that we would rather take those variance requests one by one on a case-by-case basis, so that they just come to us and request that waiver. Because there are some people who have already said, yes, I'm putting in my IA, but as soon as I get sewer, I'll tear it right out. There were a good amount of people who have already said that. So me as the representative to the board, and the board has expressed that, yes, in the event that the sewer gets there and you have complied by the system and your IA system is working, they will entertain these variances. And it's up to the homeowner to request how much time they want. If they want to postpone their connection to sewer by 5 years, they can request 5 years. It's up to the board to grant 5 years. I honestly don't know which way they're leaning, but they can request 5 years. They can request indefinitely. There is actually a request right now that somebody is requesting that they do not have to put in an IA. This is in a not in a needs area, that they don't want to put in an IA for the length of them staying in that home, because they have 9 acres and it's just them two. So they're currently requesting that, and the board is taking that into consideration. So it's not that we're trying to just bring out the sewer, hammer people who are not paying attention. That's not the way we're trying to work. And the way that we've been, to answer the secondary section of that question, we have been systematically going through all the inspections that have been done in Nantucket. All the systems that we have in Nantucket have been inspected, all the currently occupied houses. There are some abandoned homes that have been shut down, have been deemed inactive. And we have that list, and once that 5-year expiration period of that inspection is done, we have already our reminders, that's the word I'm looking for. We already have our reminders in our systems to tell us it's time to get your system inspected again. And we're slowly moving that. It's our section of our own constant quality improvement in our department that I've implemented.
Great, thank you.
And if I may add, as a personal, just as a resident of Nantucket, not as the health director here, there's a lot of questions about opening up development and what about 40Bs? 40Bs are the result of a lack of subsidized and affordable housing on this island. We do have as an island, have an issue of affordable housing. Last week, I had to condemn a home where I displaced 13 people living in one room. 40Bs are a result of our own kicking the can down the road. If we systemically approach the issues that we have on the island, water quality, sewer, housing, subsidized housing, we can fix the situations, the problems that we have here. And it behooves us as a board, as a town, as a county, in our own region to start systematically fixing these issues. Sewer is just one of them. Housing is another. Water quality is the biggest one right now. And we're on the verge of killing the golden goose if we let our harbors die. And I just urge the board to take that into consideration with their vote.
No, I
here
think
today.
we fully understand that. I think that the issue you're hearing on 40Bs is, I think we all would wish that the proposers on 40Bs were more altruistic and more in the line of your line of thinking.
Absolutely.
In point of fact, the program allows people to put up whatever 25%.
Whatever it is they want,
and
exactly.
Then 75% for basically starter second homes or luxury housing. So, I mean, there's a reason that people are skeptical about 40Bs aside from the density, notwithstanding our desire that we do provide for affordable housing.
Exactly.
So.
Nobody approaches a 40B. As a person who is developing, nobody is approaching a 40B just because they want to provide housing. They're there to make money. But we've opened it up for ourselves to allow 40Bs on this island.
Absolutely understood, but it also doesn't mean that one just needs to ignore the impact, and I think that's what you're hearing, not only in Nantucket, but in other parts of the island.
Understood.
We absolutely have to get our Affordable Housing Act together. I think we're working on that, but that also doesn't mean that we just roll over and let development run rampant because some developer is basically using 40B in our situation for their self-enrichment.
Understood.
Peter?
Roberto, if I could ask you a question. Have you ever closed a potable well in Nantucket because of total coliform or any tests that is out of line?
So the direct answer is no. Because whenever we get that water test that comes back with a coliform or a high salinity level, if it's coliform, we do request that they sanitize the well and that they do it properly. And in that case, 99 times out of 100 it works. You sanitize the well, system goes out properly. Every time we've seen a high salinity case, there have been two ways to fix it. Either the reverse osmosis system, which allows the water to become potable inside the house, or they've been downright drilling a new well, and we have seen them both. So we haven't downright had to close a house, because the only way for us to have closed that house is for them to refuse to take care of the system. Everyone has complied because everyone wants potable drinking water.
Good. Thank you.
Kara? Last word?
I just wanted to make one last pitch. I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Trust, and we have recently completed the housing plan. And as many of you know, that there's a safe harbor provision for the creation of a finite percentage of the required affordable units in a year. And with the Richmond development coming, we will reach that for a period of time. So not that it's going to be forever, but the more attention we can pay to the affordable housing issue takes 40B off the table once we reach the 10%. And there was one lady I meant to mention, I'm sorry, I missed it. You were talking about the existing septic system, and those can remain in the ground unless you want to build something on top of it. Then it has to be removed. Typically what the contractor will do is pump the tank out, crush it, fill it, and so the pipes and the tank can stay there and your vegetable garden is safe.
Thanks very much. Anybody have anything else they would like to say? Well, on behalf, don't run away, committee members. We have a couple bits of transactions to do. It won't take long. But thanks very much to the folks from the town, Rosemary, Woodard and Curran. Thanks very much, Ms. Shaw. Thank you very much, Roberto. Bill and group, thank you very much. Just a reminder, we'll be back, I think it's on the 13th. There will be a public notice posted, I think, maybe this week about the public hearing. It will be the opportunity for anybody in the community to speak on any of the articles. So I invite you all back if you wish to come and speak on your